dry point, which is part of the family of printmaking, which is known as intaglio printmaking. And that is a very kind of dictionary definition. You don't worry if you have to, you don't have to memorise that as such. It just gives you a bit of an overview of what intaglio printmaking is. In a nutshell, you're going to be chopping and changing between screen printing, a range of relief printing, and intaglio printing. So intaglio is the kind of family or genre of printmaking, essentially, that dry point is a part of. Other methods of intaglio printmaking could be etching, which is what you're going to be doing in February, engraving, mezzotint, aquatint etching, all those the types of traditional printing processes which relies on an incised mark in the plate. Monoprinting, lino, woodcut, the ink sits on the surface of the plate. With intaglio and dry point, the ink sits within a kind of well incised line, and then under pressure in the press, the ink lifts the press lifts the ink out of those incised lines. Okay, and that's the kind of difference between relief and intaglio. So essentially, it's kind of direct opposite. So the family of printing and printmaking techniques in which the image is incised into a surface, like I said, and the sunken area holds the ink, so direct opposite of a relief print. The common forms of intaglio printing are dry point, acid etching, aquatint etching, engraving and mezzotint. You won't cover that, guys, but if you do want to do a little bit of research on it and come and speak to us, we can discuss that with you another time. It's just a process that we don't really offer to level 4s at the moment. A press is required for the process. Dampened paper lifts the ink out of the recesses when pressure is applied. So it's a similar technique to engraving and all intaglio, where it sits within the lines. The difference between dry point and, say, etching is that etching is done with a chemical, okay? So the acid dissolves the material and takes it away from the line. With this, you physically do it yourself. You scratch into the plate with usually an etching needle or anything that's got a kind of abrasive or abrasive surface or a point on it. Okay, same as engraving. The kind of burring that you use takes the material away from the plate, like the acid dissolves the material and takes it away. The difference with dry point is the material is just essentially dispersed, it kind of displaced out of the, I've already got it written down, it's a very small diagram, just a very little diagram that I drew for the previous group. If you imagine the top plate to be your etching plate, looking at it from the side, the ink sits in this little well here, so it prints a very clean cut line. This one is a dry point plate, okay? So when you've scratched this plate, whether it's plastic, metal, it displaces the material to the side. You probably see this when you're looking at farmers' fields and it kind of goes through the mud. So when you look at a farmer's field, the plough runs through the mud and it kind of moves the mud to the side because it's just displacing it from one area to another, and that's essentially what you're doing with dry point as opposed to it being dissolved. So when you ink it up, the ink sits within the well, and it also sits within those kind of mounds either side, which are called burrs, and that means essentially you're printing a double line. And that gives a really lovely velvety tone to the work, a velvety kind of softness to the line, as opposed to a very sharp line of etching. So dry point's really lovely for that, to get that rich, deep tone. And this just essentially explains that. So the ink will sit in the incised line and the ragged burr. As a consequence of this double line, dry point strokes will have a velvety softness that an engraving or etching lacks. Lots of different things you can do to create those marks in the plate, and we'll show you some of those in a second. anything sharp, owls or bodkins that you use for bookmaking, screws, nails, etching needles, dentistry tools, engineers, scribes, sandpaper, wire wool, lots of different things to scratch the plate. Inking up process is completely different to monoprinting, lino and woodcut. That's because the ink needs to sit beneath the surface. So we'll go through the inking up process in a little bit. For this reason, because it's got a burr actually, I should mention that you can't produce as many prints from the same plate. With etching, you can, that's what it was designed for, to yield print after print after print. With dry point, you can't really yield as many prints, because when the pressure is applied in the press, it just keeps flattening the burr ever so slightly, and eventually that burr will just disappear and you'll see little white lines either side of your marks, and then you might consider that plate useless then. You could even maybe print and record the process of the burr coming down if you want to. It might be something that you want to incorporate in your work, but just to bear in mind, if you want to do an edition, a larger edition, dry point might not be the way to go. You might get as little as 6 decent prints out of your plate. I think with the dry point plastic, you'll probably get at least 15, but just to bear that in mind really. So a few examples. This is the type of velvety tone that I'm talking about here. You can see where it's looking really like luscious and in a deep black. You're working with line essentially, so you have to think about all those techniques of drawing with line, cross-hatching, using the line to create tone as opposed to graphite where you can just rub and create a tonal area. You'll have to use cross-hatching if you want to create these deeper tones. Obviously the closer the cross-hatch, those burrs will eventually just print very close together and give you a deeper tone. So if you want to create those areas, cross-hatch really densely. Louise Bourgeois, the dry point from here. You'll notice a bit of a grey tone on the plate. Depending on what plate you use, it doesn't quite wipe clean, so you might like that. And there's a few little rogue scratches on there on the metal, which I quite like. It's another one from Louise Bourgeois. Most famous for a large spider sculpture in Bilbao, I think it was. Ross Loveday, a bit more abstract there. Landscape. These tonal areas are created by something called carborundum, which you might have used in the monoprinting workshop. A little fine grit that you can use as a resist, like you were using the talc and tape and things. When mixed with white acrylic paint, you can paint it on, and then where that is applied, you're going to print a very, very deep tone. So this circle on that print in the corner there, that was printed with carborundum. Okay, the ink the carborundum kind of sucks in loads and loads of ink, and you'll print a really deep tone. We've got some on this as well, this litho plate. Got a nice big brush stroke of carborundum there. Scratch back into it while it's wet. Also create some nice marks. And here we've got carborundum with some varnish on as well. So you can mess around with the different kind of textures, and it will yield a different mark. So carborundum, I love the stuff. Again, this is mainly carborundum actually. He's inked up the same plate in different colours, which is called alla poupe inking, but essentially it just means you're inking up the same plate in an intaglio way, but in different colours. Might have scratched back through the carborundum there, scraped it thinly in certain areas and painted it on thicker. This is actually a dry point. It's really, really detailed, so you can pick up quite a lot of detail if you're using the correct plate. The dry point plastic seems to work really well for detail. and I think that would have been on quite a large scale as well. Jasper Johns seems to have drawn an outline of different numbers and kind of layered them over the top of each other. Ian McKeever found this on the Tate website actually. There's a search engine that if you put different printing processes into, it will give you an idea of artists that work within that process. This could be carborundum and an etching needle, or it could even possibly be really dense marks together that print as a dense black. Edward Paolozzi, lots of small scratches there to create the image. Goya, I think that one might actually be an etching, but they did do dry points as well. Part of the same family. Picasso as well. So you can see he might have used like a wire brush or something in the background to create that texture, and then scratched in with an etching needle and cross-hatched to get the darker tones. The deeper you etch into it or scratch into it, the more ink it will hold and the darker mark that it will make. Okay, and that's it. So I'll just do a little demo.